Sabbath keeping is a common theme throughout the Bible. The word Sabbath is mentioned roughly the same number of times in the Gospels as it is in the Pentateuch, the first 5 books of the Bible. The Sabbath scenes in Mark's Gospel, in which the hungry disciples pluck heads of grains as they walk along, and Jesus heals a man with a withered hand, are hardly unique. Throughout the Gospels, we find Jesus at work on the Sabbath, upending the rules, each and every time, embodying what he says in Matthew's Gospel, "Do not think that I have come to abolish the law or the prophets. I have not come to abolish them, but to fulfill them." The plucking of grains and the healing of hands on the Sabbath also appear in Matthew's Gospel and in Luke's. But only in Mark do we hear Jesus say, "The Sabbath was made for humankind, and not humankind for the Sabbath." The purpose of the Sabbath is not adherence to the law, but rest and restoration in the remembrance of God's abundant goodness. This is what we do each Sunday, breaking from our labors in order to rest in the goodness of God, to give thanks and praise, and to be restored. Like the hungry disciples walking through the fields, we also are fed. Maybe not withered hands are restored, but certainly withered hearts and souls are healed, or withering faith renewed. What's more, we do this in remembrance of the one who saw that the hungry were fed, the one who healed even on the Sabbath, the one who died and rose again for us. This is why we say the gospel is good news and not just good advice, as some have put it. The gospel is not primarily a way of life. It is not something we do, but something that has been done for us and something we must respond to. The Sabbath was made for humankind and not humankind for the Sabbath. Of this gospel view, the commentator Andrew Clavin has written, "Christ has released us from the shackles of religious obligation. He has liberated us from the enforced codes of behavior." Or as St. Paul wrote to the Galatians, "It is for freedom that Christ has set us free." Even as he cautioned elsewhere, that gospel freedom comes with responsibility. "All things are lawful," he wrote to the Corinthians, "but not all things are helpful." And as we hear in the appointed epistle in his second letter to the church in Corinth, "It is the God who said, 'Let light shine out of darkness,' who has shone in our hearts to give the light of the knowledge of the glory of God in the face of Jesus Christ. But we have this treasure in clay jars, so that it may be made clear that this extraordinary power belongs to God and does not come from us." Our lectionary wonderfully pairs this image that we are earthen vessels, fragile clay jars containing and entrusted with gospel truth, with the story of Jesus healing the man with the withered hand on the Sabbath, and with the psalmist's beautiful proclamation, "For you yourself created my inmost parts. You knit me together in my mother's womb. I will thank you because I am marvelously made. Your works are wonderful, and I know it well. My body was not hidden from you while I was being made in secret and woven in the depths of the earth. Your eyes beheld my limbs, yet unfinished in the womb. All of them were written in your book. They were fashioned day by day, when as yet there was none of them." We are fragile clay jars, marvelously made, beheld and known by God. The man with the withered hand reminding us of the fragility of such earthen vessels. One minute the jar is intact, then the next it may be cracked or broken. And how, when filled with the knowledge of the glory of God in the face of Jesus Christ, it can be restored. That the gospel treasure within us has the capacity to lift up and hold together any earthen vessel beyond any trial or tribulation. At least that's what the preacher in me wants to say. My job is to deliver the good news, but it's also to be real with you. And sometimes, well, always, when you are in the midst of suffering, of looking around and seeing the shattered clay shards of your life or of a beloved's inexplicably scattered, it is hard to imagine how they might ever be put back together again, restored. For going on 9 weeks now, Jim and I have been trying to put the pieces back together after an inexplicable medical event landed him in the hospital with a prognosis of recovery that would likely take weeks or months, and in a medical system that ultimately failed us. We put our faith in one doctor's hands after another. And if I'm honest with you, throughout the ordeal I have struggled to remain steadfast in my belief in the power of prayer and my faith in God, searched desperately for how all of this could possibly somehow be a workshop for God's grace. To carry with conviction St. Paul's words, "We are afflicted in every way, but not crushed. Perplexed, but not driven to despair. Struck down, but not destroyed." When in fact, Jim and I were living through exactly what the apostle is saying, that none of us are immune from suffering, and that the treasure we hold in our fragile lives of faith is greater. That the only way we let light shine out of darkness is exactly through a crack in our earthen vessels. And as the great Canadian singer-songwriter Leonard Cohen reminded, those cracks also let the light back in. "Ring the bells that still can ring," he wrote in his song anthem. "Forget your perfect offering. There is a crack in everything. That's how the light gets in." In a rare commentary on his lyrics, Cohen said, "There is a crack in everything that you can put together, physical objects, mental objects, constructions of any kind. But that's where the light gets in, and that's where the resurrection is, and that's where the return, that's where the repentance is, with the brokenness of things." Similarly, imprisoned for the love that dare not speak its name, Oscar Wilde wrote in his Ballad of Reading Gaol, "Ah, happy day they whose hearts can break, and peace of pardon win. How else but through a broken heart may Lord Christ enter in?" Dear friends, every one of us has some sort of brokenness in our past. Perhaps we have grieved from a broken heart or a complicated situation or the loss of health or relationships. Whether it's from choices we have made or circumstances beyond our control, sometimes we find ourselves so profoundly broken that we don't know how things could ever be restored. In the apocryphal book of Sirach, we read, "Like clay in the hand of the potter, to be molded as he pleases, so all are in the hand of their maker. And so it is with the potter, sitting at his work and turning the wheel with his feet. He is always deeply concerned over his products." The patriarch Job, yielding to the potter's hand, gratefully acknowledged, "Your hands have made me and fashioned me. You have made me like clay." So too are there many marvelous stories of potters in ancient China. In one of them, a noble is riding through a town and he passes a potter at work. He admires the pots the man is making, their grace and a kind of rude strength to them. He dismounts from his horse and speaks with the potter. "How are you able to form these vessels so that they possess such convincing beauty?" "Oh," answered the potter, "you are looking at the mere outward shape. I am interested only in what remains after the pot has been broken." A story that deeply resonates with the image we have from St. Paul and the psalmist, that we ourselves are fragile clay jars in which the interior form of our very being is shaped by God, and we are known inside and out, where we spin and turn on the potter's wheel. You press upon me behind and before, and lay your hand upon me. You yourself created my inmost parts, fashioned me day by day. Indeed, I will thank you because I am marvelously made. Or as one old gospel hymn put it, have thine own way, Lord, have thine own way. Thou art the potter, I am the clay. Mold me and make me after thy will while I am waiting, yielded and still. Now don't get me wrong. I am neither saying that God creates us in order to be broken, nor that grace makes suffering justifiable, but that through Christ, whenever there is brokenness, there is the promise of restoration, and that grace is the means by which God will accomplish it. And that being reworked by the hand of God isn't judgment or punishment so much as it is something more than we could ever hope for. That on the flip side of withered faith is restoration and wholeness. Discipleship is hard. We wobble, even as we turn on the potter's wheel. We get misshapen. We crack. But never once does the potter throw away the clay. Rather, over and over again, reworks it, reworks us into vessels fit for the kingdom, cracks and all. There is a centuries-old Japanese practice that I think beautifully illustrates this, the ancient art of repairing broken pottery, known as kintsugi, meaning to join with gold. Rather than rejoin the clay pieces with a camouflaged adhesive, the kintsugi technique employs a special lacquer that is mixed with pure gold. Once completed, beautiful seams of gold glint in the conspicuous cracks of ceramic wares, giving a one-of-a-kind appearance to each restored piece, emphasizing its fractures and breaks, instead of hiding or disguising them. In fact, kintsugi often makes the repaired piece even more beautiful than the original. Every crack and sign of former brokenness transformed into a vein of precious gold. So too can grace put the pieces of our lives back together in a way that neither hides nor disguises our suffering, but gilds it, so that it becomes the place from which light can shine in the darkness, equaling the treasure we have been given in the knowledge of the glory of God in the face of Jesus Christ. We cannot put ourselves back together again. We cannot repair or restore ourselves any more than a shattered bowl or a clay jar can repair itself. Only God can do this through Christ, who lovingly fills in the cracks with the gold and lacquer of his love and pieces everything together again, transforming us in the process. This is called salvation. And we have this treasure in clay jars, my friends, so that it may be made clear that this extraordinary power belongs to God and does not come from us, but is, astonishingly, within us. Let us not only remember then, but remind one another of the gilded treasure of God's love that has been entrusted to us, mere jars of clay, yet marvelously made.